The Smoother Cable Faster update, wait, that wasn't right. The Smoother Stable Faster update has released for Space Engineers 2, and whilst it isn't a massive update including a lot of new features, it instead focuses on 2 heavily requested things, and additionally has a bunch of other minor improvements as well. The main focus of this update is performance, and this isn't necessarily improving frame rates, as the average frame rate of the game will remain around the same for your hardware, but instead focusing on smoothing the peaks and reducing the stuttering of Space Engineers 2. For example, they put a lot of work into resolving the stutters as you move around and load new areas, which is one of the areas I personally saw the most stuttering. And additionally, when destroying ships and terrain, it's still there, but it's way better than it was before. Sometimes the game will do a full hang when you hit the ground. The loading of menus is massively improved, and there's been a bunch of other performance improvements in this update to massively reduce those stutters that are interrupting your gameplay. They've also improved the performance of the game over long play sessions. Previously, the game would start to get slower and slower the longer you played it, but that has also been improved on top of the stuttering. And the developers have said there'll be more updates in the future that focus on performance in order to iron out more of these issues, and also to improve general performance as well. A change that will definitely catch people out is changes to the speed limiter, but before we talk about that though, we need to quickly talk about some changes to the user interface first. As you can see, the speed and altitude indicators have been changed, and additionally they've added these bars next to them that indicate when you're accelerating, and if I slow down you can see that it indicates when you're decelerating as well, and obviously the altitude one shows when your altitude is increasing, and if I turn my dampeners off you can also see it shows when my altitude is decreasing, just giving you more information as you're flying around with both your jetpack and in the ship. The reason I wanted to talk about this is that next to speed, you can see that there is this limiter icon. So this was already a feature for the game for jetpacks. As you can see, I'm flying around and I'm capped at 20 meters per second. But if I press shift, you can see on the bottom left, a bar is slowly filling up. And when it fills up to the max, my speed is uncapped. The little icon for limiter is gone and I can fly around at the maximum speed of the game. And if I release shift, you can see the limiter icon goes back on and I'm reduced back down to 20 meters per second. Now, one new feature that's been added is if I double tap shift, this now disables the speed limit as long as I'm holding forward, so I can save my pinky finger from holding down the shift key. However, this has more utility with the new additions to the speed limiter. So here I am in a ship, and if I open up the terminal for the cockpit, you can see I have 2 new options, these being thrust overload warning, which we'll talk about in a minute, and enable speed limit, which by default for new ships is on, and for existing ships and ships that were built previously that you have blueprints of, this will be turned off. This, as you can see by the limiter icon, applies the jetpack speed limits to your ship. So by default now, the ship is capped to 20 meters per second, and if I press shift, you can see that the cap is released and I can go as fast as I'm able to accelerate. However, if I release shift, the speed limiter goes back on, reducing my speed back down to 20 meters per second. As with my jetpack, I can also double tap shift to disable the limit. However, unlike the jetpack, the speed limit is not re-enabled once I let go of the movement controls. It is instead re-enabled when I press shift again, making the speed limit icon reappear and rapidly slowing me down to 20 meters per second again. The reason 20 meters per second is important is that in Space Engineers 2, grids and terrain do not take damage when you're moving at and below 20 meters per second. So, as you can see, I can slam into this boulder no problem and take 0 damage in the process. And I can slam myself into the train and slide along at no issue, not taking any damage. He says, taking damage. So it makes a safe way to fly your ship. However, as I said, you can press shift to remove it, you can double press shift to remove it, or you can go back to the cockpit and just disable it here, which permanently disables the speed limit, and even pressing shift doesn't bring it back. It is just permanently disabled for this ship. The other option in the cockpit we looked at earlier was the thrust overload warning, which as you can see is showing on my screen here. This is specifically for atmospheric thrusters, and it shows you when your thrusters are at a height that they stop working or start to get their thrust reduced, which will result in them not being powerful enough to keep your ship in the sky. As we all know, I have never crashed a ship once in Space Engineers, and this definitely didn't happen to me during my last survival playthrough, where I flew a ship up to some mountains, mined some ore, and then my ship was suddenly too heavy to fly anymore and might have rolled down the side of the mountain. But obviously that didn't actually happen, it's just a hypothetical. But this would be very useful to give you an early warning for that kind of thing. There is a new save game screen you can see here, which when you click on a save, you can see all of the backup saves under it. Recognize this thumbnail? It seems familiar. One thing that's also changed in this update is that manual saves and autosaves will be seen separately. Now, one thing you might notice from all of my save games is that there's only manual saves, and this is because I've been playing with autosaves turned off, because the autosaves would overwrite my manual saves, which would be very annoying when I wanted to load back to something, and that save was just completely gone. I'm also that guy that maxes out the number of backup saves for a world in Space Engineers 1, just in case. You never know when you might need to load back 17 hours. But in the new update, manual saves and autosaves will be saved separately, so you'll have 5 backup manual saves and 5 backup autosaves. So maybe it's time for me now to turn autosaves back on. Additionally, the game now creates an autosave automatically when you enter a cockpit, as you can see in the top right here. As when you get in a cockpit is when things potentially might start to go wrong. As you can see, that autosave has been added to my list up here. they've made a number of changes to the tutorial world of Space Engineers 2. One of the more notable changes is that they've added sources of iron, nickel, silicon and cobalt to areas right near the surface of the starting area to make them much easier to get them in the early game, as pretty much the first contract you get was get 2000 iron, which was a bit of a pain in the butt when you didn't have a ship and you only had your drill, and because these resources spawned kind of randomly, it's possible they might have to walk or mine down a very long way in order to get access to that 2000 iron to even start off. I did a members only video about this, where I spoke about how this was a terrible way to start a new player into the game, and it looks like the developers have addressed this. It's sort of a band-aid fix, but it's definitely much better than it was before, as there's nothing I hate more in the beginning of Space Engineers than being forced to dig just straight down 70 meters underground in order to get your first amount of ores in the game, listening to that lovely drilling sound over and over in my brain, sending me absolutely insane in order to get the basic resources to get started and actually play the game properly. They've also made other changes to the tutorial worlds as well. They've made it so some of the starting contracts that you get now spawn much closer to the starting outpost, as previously they could spawn a very long way away, which meant you had to fly some pretty extreme distances just to get started off. They have made changes to nighttime in the game, making nights a little bit brighter, as previously nighttime in Space Engineers 2 was very dark, I would say potentially unplayably dark, but I know some people do really like their darker nights. However, they have lightened it up a little bit, so that nighttime is a lot more visible than before. It's still dark, but not the pitch black unceasing void that it was before. This update also fixes a bunch of bugs and crashes as well, and you can find the full changelog in the description below this video. As far as we're aware, the next update after this will still be the NPC and multiplayer update they've been teasing, and they've been showing a lot more NPC footage recently, some very interesting NPC footage actually. So we'll be covering that in a future video, don't forget to like and subscribe to see that. And additionally, over the years, I've managed to accrue lots of keys for both DLCs to Space Engineers 1 and additionally the Pioneer Edition for Space Engineers 2. Very soon, I'm going to be giving all of those away to people in my Discord, so if you want a chance to win any free Space Engineers 1 DLCs or the Space Engineers 2 Pioneer Edition, join my Discord in the description below. And if you want to get early access to videos and also exclusive videos, become a YouTube member today.